Welcome to our podcast, where we talk all things Formula One. Today we're going to be breaking down the season so far and seeing how the top 5 teams are doing this year. To start us off, we have 2 teams that are battling for 4th place, Alpine and McLaren. Now, McLaren was a very strong team last year, but this year they have done much more poor than they did last year. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I mean, I think, coming off of last year where they were really battling Ferrari for 3rd.
Yes.
A really strong contending team to now trailing Alpine, battling for 4th. There's definitely been a step back for them with the rule changes.
Yes, and there seems to be a pretty significant gap between their 2 drivers, Norris and Ricciardo. Very clearly Norris has stepped up as the sort of elite driver for McLaren, while Ricciardo has very much lagged behind. And I think that has hurt McLaren in the long run in the championship, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Norris emerged last year, especially in the beginning of last year, as a really strong elite driver. Ricciardo was brought in to close that gap with Norris so that they would have 2 strong contending drivers. Well, that's just not happened.
Yeah.
And when you have one driver consistently at least in the top 10 and then the other one finishing at the bottom of the grid, it's not going to serve you very well.
Yeah. Now, on the opposite side of the spectrum is their competitor Alpine, who seems to have improved a lot over last year. And their 2 drivers, Alonso and Ocon, look much stronger this year than they have in past years. Especially Fernando Alonso has brought a lot of, I think, talents to the Alpine team and probably helped improve the car a lot. Don't you think?
Yeah, I agree. And I think, they've consistently stepped up. The rule changes didn't affect them adversely, and they've continued to grow. And along with, obviously, Alonso's skill as a driver, I think his leadership and all the years of experience, there's a calmness to that team, and they're strong this year. It's going to be really hard for McLaren to move up into 4th, I think, with only a few races left.
Now, another team that has grown a lot this year is the Mercedes team. Now, last year, Mercedes was one of, if not the strongest team. There was a very controversial finish to the end of the season, but they came into this year lagging behind a little bit. They've definitely been the 3rd place team this year, but they've started coming on stronger, don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, Mercedes is an interesting case because they have arguably the best driving combination talent-wise. You've got
Hamilton and Russell, yeah. It's a very good team.
One of the best of all time.
Yes.
And George Russell, who's extremely talented. We've seen that in the Williams, and we've seen that so far here with Mercedes.
Yes, in fact, I think he's outperformed Hamilton for the most part this year.
He has. Yeah, he's taken to the rule changes in the new car much more easily and smoothly than Hamilton.
Yeah.
For sure, although now Hamilton is getting used to the car.
Yes.
They really struggled.
Yeah, early in the year they really struggled with porpoising, especially. It was bad. They looked worse for wear. In fact, they didn't even look like they were going to be a top 3 team, I don't think, at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
But certainly in the last few races, they have really stepped up their game, and arguably they could even give Ferrari a run if they keep improving at this rate.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the porpoising was an issue. And for those of you that don't know what porpoising is, it's something that happens with the cars in the high-speed sections, and it relates to downforce where they literally
bounce up and down.
Yeah, bounce up and down. Yeah. It looks kind of like a porpoise, right? And it greatly affects their ability to brake and turn into the corners. And that was the plight of the Mercedes. But as you said, through the year, they started coming on. They've got the best strategists, arguably the best strategists. Their strategies are always consistent. Occasionally the pit crews can struggle.
They have choked the pit stops a few times.
But generally speaking, they're pretty good. And they've got the great drivers, and they've been coming on. They've been on the podium week after week.
Yes, very consistent. The Mercedes team this year has been very consistent. Some of the other teams, like Ferrari, which we'll talk about in a second, are also very strong, but they have struggled with their consistency. Same goes for, I think, McLaren as well. But Mercedes has been very consistent. At least once they started getting better, they've been very consistent, being in the podium in the top 4 or 5. And I think they're going to end up having a strong year and probably a very strong next year as well.
Yeah, they're poised very well for a strong finish, and Ferrari will have to keep on it, or they're going to find that Mercedes could pass them this year in both drivers and constructors championships. And yeah, they're going to be strong next year.
Yeah, so moving on to Ferrari. Ferrari has been sort of the talk of the town for a while now in Formula One for a variety of reasons. And a large part of that is that coming into this year, they seem to have the strongest car. And they have two very talented drivers in the form of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, but they just haven't quite been able to put it together this year. They've had issues with strategy and reliability, and they're going to need, like you said before, to keep on it this year, I think, if they want to keep that second place.
Yeah, they started very strong. I mean, clearly, with the rule changes and the new car, they were the ones that picked it up first. They were dominant in the first three races, and Red Bull, their main rival at that point, had some challenges and struggles with reliability themselves. It looked like Ferrari was on pace. Leclerc was flying.
Yes.
Had two victories. He was way ahead in the points. I think at one point 90 points ahead. And then it
all went downhill. Ferrari has had a myriad of issues with their strategy. Many comically bad. I mean, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but they have made some very rookie mistakes when it comes to their pit strategies, and they've also had many issues with reliability. It's cost them at least 3 wins, or maybe more at this point, and they have fallen back very far in the points from where they were at the beginning of the year when it looked like they might be the favorite to win. So we'll have to see if this year they can get their crap together, and if, their two drivers are very good, but right now they're just working with a team that seems to be floundering and just seems to be very lost. So
it's very disjointed.
Yes.
And as you said, I mentioned Mercedes driving duo. This Ferrari driving duo is right there with talent. I mean, Leclerc's, he's been on pole more than anybody this year.
Yes.
And, and is extremely talented. His racecraft is excellent. Sainz is also very fast.
Very consistent, yes.
He does very well passing and is a great teammate with Leclerc. And it's just shocking almost.
Yeah, and it's really a shame as well, because this is one of the strongest, I think, teams that Ferrari has had in a while. But Ferrari, for a long time, has had this sort of history of bringing on these really great drivers and just sort of wasting their potential. And it's just really a shame to see. But hopefully next year, or maybe even towards the end of this year, they can get back on track and we can maybe see a stronger season for Ferrari next year.
Yeah.
Now,
nice.
In a completely different scenario is the leading team Red Bull and their two drivers, Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez. They have completely run away with the season this year. Like you said earlier on, they had some struggles with reliability, and it looked like they were going to have a big struggle against Ferrari. But as time went on and Ferrari encountered more issues, Red Bull has just completely eliminated any chance of any other team winning the championship. They are so far ahead at this point, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. And I feel like, in a way, Miami was a bit of a turning point for them.
Yes.
They struggled at the beginning of the year. Ferrari had this big lead. They had clearly the faster car. And then all of a sudden, Red Bull starts coming out. And Miami, I feel, is where it really tipped.
Yeah.
Where, you had Leclerc ahead and Verstappen just went by. And in a way, that's been the story of it ever since. And then, as you mentioned, all of the difficulties of Ferrari just opened the door for Red Bull to just take charge. And Verstappen, he's been driving so well this year.
Much better than I think last year.
Yeah.
Last year, I think he was almost a bit desperate for the win, and he was very hot-headed, made a lot of kind of childish mistakes, crashed out a lot with Hamilton, who was his rival at the time. And of course that season ended in very controversial fashion with Verstappen winning. But I feel like now that he's won the championship, he's much more calm and collected and a much more dangerous driver. He is absolutely on point, and he is far and away the most impressive driver, I think, that we've seen this year. And that team, the Red Bull team, looks very, very strong. And it's interesting that you mentioned Miami, because that race sort of started a trend that I think we've seen in a lot of races where even if Leclerc and Sainz are driving at their best, the Ferrari just doesn't seem to quite have the pace, especially on some of the faster tracks. In fact, just this past day, the Italian Grand Prix in Monza, it was very clear that the Red Bull just had more pace. Ferrari did everything they could. The two drivers drove as well as they could. But at the end of the day, the Red Bull was just too fast. And I think that along with the issues for Ferrari, has really cemented their place as the dominant team this year.
Yeah, and thinking how dominant Max Verstappen is in relationship to his teammate Perez, they're not all that close. And so this huge lead that Red Bull has is Max Verstappen. I mean, he's really just dominated. And it's interesting, you mentioned him being so dangerous. Last year, I felt like he was dangerous, but in a different way.
In a different way, yes.
You know, like you're almost afraid to pass him. Like you're gonna end up in the gravel if you try to pass Max Verstappen. This year, he's a different driver. And
completely
it's
different.
nice to watch him. He's calm. He's matured. It helps that he won the championship, like you said, and it also helps that he has over 100 points or more lead in the championship. Thus far, I mean, he could wrap it up next race.
Yeah, and it's not just the drivers, Verstappen, especially Verstappen and Perez, but also their team. The Red Bull team this year is very strong. They have much more confidence, it seems, in their strategy than Ferrari does. Ferrari tends to be all over the place, making last-minute decisions. Red Bull is very straight and to the point. They've been very good with their strategy this year, better, I think, than last year. And they also have one of the best pit crews, I would say, on the grid. They're consistently very quick, and they consistently make good decisions.
Yeah, they're the whole package.
Yes, they have the whole package.
They have it all. They have great drivers, the strategists. It used to be Mercedes was the dominant in the strategy department, and maybe Red Bull second. I feel like they're right there.
Yeah, I feel like they learned a lot from Mercedes, actually. Last year. I think they learned a lot from their title fight last year.
And they can make decisions on the fly.
Yes.
If something's not going quite right, they can adjust, they can change their strategies, they don't just blindly follow what they decided earlier. They're making the right decisions quicker than the other teams. And as you said, the pit crew is always reliable and quick. It's the whole package. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with for some time to come.
Yeah, I agree. So thank you for coming to the podcast, and that is all we have for you today.